So the other day I met up with some friends to go watch a movie. We didn't know what to watch, so we pulled up the theater's website and eventually settled on The Black Phone 2, a direct sequel to the 2021 film based off of a short story by Joe King. Yeah, you're not fooling anyone, Mr. Hill. This would turn out to be an interesting decision because I'd never seen the first one, but being the self-important critic I am, I assumed I'd be able to get the gist of it as it went along. Not only was I right, but I also caught on to something I would prove myself correct about by going home and watching the first one at 1 in the morning. It was wildly different from the source material, and not in a good way. I'm assuming that, unlike myself, you've seen the original before considering the sequel, but given that it's still fairly new, I'll drop a spoiler warning for the new one. Join me as I try to make sense of this doomed project. We pick up with Finney and Gwen 4 years after the older of the pair escaped from the clutches of the Grabber, a masked murderer who unwittingly had a landline capable of contacting his victims' ghosts in his basement. Gwen has seemingly turned into a pretty normal teenager, but Finney has, for totally unknowable reasons, become jaded and aggressive. But their dad has stopped drinking, and it looks like with enough time, things might heal. Alas, Gwen's visions return, so our heroes head to the mountain summer camp she sees in them with their friend Ernie to figure them out and are blocked in by the snow. The only other people around are the camp's owner, his niece, and a married couple that helps keep things afloat. Gwen's visions grow worse and worse and are soon accompanied by real-world events that alert everybody to what's going on. Our crew does some digging and learns that Finney and Gwen's mother worked at the camp as a counselor at the same time the Grabber did and used his position to begin his life of murder. Because he got his start here, the ghost now haunts the camp and lured our heroes into his trap so he could torment and eventually kill them. The rest of the movie is based around recovering the bodies of the Grabber's initial victims to banish his ghost and free Gwen from his influence. As they get closer to their goal, the Grabber ramps up pressure until he has Gwen's consciousness in a stranglehold. He shows her that while alive, her mom also had visions through which she found out who he was and what he was doing. It turns out that she did not kill herself like everybody thought, but was murdered by the Grabber to keep her quiet. With this knowledge in hand, Gwen draws on a well of power within herself and kicks his ghost out of her mind. Then there's a giant smackdown between Gwen Levin and Finney against the Grabber, ending in Finney beating the salt out of his head against the lake ice. I guess that kills ghosts? That's pretty much it. Oh, no, wait, Gwen and Ernie are dating now. Also, Finney and Gwen's dad came to rescue them via a snowplow. Wait, why didn't the camp already have one on hand? Whatever. There's a nice little family moment when Gwen tells him what really happened to her mom, and then they head home. Okay, I think that's really it now. Well, that was weird. Like I said, I only saw the first one after this, but even so, I could tell that it was very different from the first one based on IMDb plot summaries. For one thing, it changed mediums. Ghosts were always a part of the story, but they went from being one element to the entire focus. Most notably, this means the Grabber not having a corporeal form and therefore being capable of doing whatever he wants. The narrative went from a reality-based one that had ghosts in it to a full-blown ghosty extravaganza. Part of what made the ghost angle compelling in the original was the mystery behind it. We didn't know how the kids were using the phone or really anything about them. But the bigger issue is the film's insistence on taking the spotlight from Finney, the one who actually fought and won against this guy, and placed it squarely on Gwen. To his credit, Finney puts his own stuff on the back burner to look out for his sister and gets some closure by killing the Grabber a second time. But he spends most of the movie being quiet in the corner and clearly still has a lot of stuff to work out by the end. It's not hard to guess what the filmmakers were thinking with this one. We need a new angle, and it has to use ghosts because clearly that's what pays. Well, Bob, what if we made his psychic sister the main character? Cracking idea! But should we be concerned that she's never actually seen one before now? Nah, it'll be fine. Smooth move, folks. At its core, it wasn't a bad story, and might have worked as its own movie, but as a continuation of The Black Phone, it falls flat. The kid escapes murder's basement idea had run its course, and I'm guessing the filmmakers ran out of source material pretty quickly, so if they wanted audiences to return, then they need something new. Of course, there was always the option of just letting sleeping dogs lie. Nevertheless, I don't think this was the way to go. Not that any of this matters, because it's all just an afterthought. The movie's first goal is to show you a bunch of blood and mayhem, because who needs carefully paced tension when you have shock value? The flashbacks where the Grabber murders his victims are completely extraneous because the ghosts come back to tell Gwen and Finney everything, so why do we need to see it when there are more important things to focus on? I mean, it's a horror movie, so you can't be shocked when there's, horror, but you can hardly be faulted for expecting movies from the same franchise to keep a similar tone and violence level from one film to the next. So where does that leave us? Well, there's some fun stuff with the camera, and Mason Thames is a decent actor when he gets out of his own way, but I can't picture The Black Phone 2 sweeping the Oscars. Between remaking one of the most beloved animated films of the 21st century and being forced into a backseat for his own sequel, Thames needs to take some clever steps to get back on track, and I seriously doubt that Regretting You is gonna be one. As for Joe Hill King, I don't know what all this adds up to besides a really hefty royalties paycheck. The truth is that I don't have much to say about this movie because there's not much to say about it. I liked The Black Phone just fine, but it's not the type of thing that was crying out for a sequel. I guess it follows that said sequel would have to come up with something to get butts in seats, and it probably wouldn't be top tier writing. Lo, it was not. I suppose the lesson to be learned here is that The Black Phone 2 can serve as a warning against what happens when you allow corporate greed to overtake creative integrity. But honestly, it's such low hanging fruit that I struggle to emphasize it too hard. Point of all this being, I'm glad I don't have a landline.